Hey everyone, welcome to week 61, day one. This is new week, new theme, and the theme for this week is going to be one small brush. We're going to use the same brush, a small brush, throughout the whole painting for the whole week. So we'll see how we're going to do. Okay, let's get started. This is day one. This is a new week, new theme. And the theme for this week is going to be one small brush. If you're like me, whenever you hear one small brush, there's going to be a lot of alarms going off in your head. And let's try to break this title apart to see if we can understand it a little bit better. We're only going to use one brush. And that's a challenge in and of itself. But we can work around that, and I think we proved that by doing a one brush week where we used a number of different brushes. Some of them were cheap, some of them were expensive, some of them were big, some of them were smaller. So I think using only one brush is totally fine. But small brush, one small brush, that sounds a little more complicated. If you ask me, out of the blue, I would say it goes against the idea that I have of painting. So let's try to make sense of what I just said. Why would it go against the idea of painting? Well, I think you guys have heard me say time and time again, I'm probably like a broken record with this, that one of the things, if not the thing, that interests me most about painting, like the philosophy, the underlying philosophy that I connect with the most in painting is the idea of wholeness, is the idea of bigness. This notion that we can, through painting, try and tap into the essence of things, the very makeup of things. Maybe in real life, maybe the nature that we observe can be highly complicated, can be composed of highly complex entities. But when filtered through painting, things become clearer, dare I say. Things can become a little simpler. Things can be easily digested and understood because great painters, and to me this is the mark of a brilliant painter, they can take something that is inherently very complicated, overwhelming when you're looking at it directly from nature, and through the act of painting, they can solve this puzzle that is attempting to comprehend the very makeup of things. For example, how can I say foliage without feeling the obligation to paint thousands of individual leaves? How could I say full hair without feeling obligated to paint tens of thousands of individual hairs? I actually have no clue how many hairs one has in one's head because in my case, it's single digits. So that particular example maybe doesn't apply to me. But I think you're getting the gist of this. Nature is very, very complex. It's not made up of big cubes that you could spot every facet and paint things in a very simple manner. It's very, very complicated. Even the human body, if we just take one little moment of nature, which could be exemplified by the willingness to represent ourselves. If we take that and we just think of what it means to represent the human body, the expression that is possible through our bodies, our own human nature, oh my God, that's a lifetime. It would take a lifetime only to understand that this is bigger than us. This is almost like a losing effort. There's this underlying fact beneath the idea of wanting to paint nature, which is that this is a formidable act. It's almost staggering to try and grasp nature. And that's why when you see geniuses, when you see tremendously talented people that understand what lies underneath this facade that is nature, and they can translate that through painting, then you just fall down to your knees and you go like, she's an incredible painter. She's doing things that are not easy to do. And sometimes you want to explain to people like, this is not easy. I know it's just a bunch of grass. All I have to do is paint grass. But again, many times these endeavors, as simple as they may appear to be, they can crush us. They are puzzles that are so difficult to solve that's when our ego gets destroyed. And we try to explain to other people like, no, this was very complicated. I was trying to paint a bowl of rice and I just didn't know how to go about it. And people go like, what the hell are they talking about? What could be complicated about a bowl of rice? Just paint rice. It's a bunch of white little beads. Just paint a bunch of white little beads. And that's where we completely fall apart. That's when we realize that we might as well be speaking another language to people sometimes because it is something that's very, very hard to get. It's something that's very complicated. Now, having said that, one of the things that incredible masters of painting have taught us throughout the years, throughout centuries, is that if we go for the bigness of things, if we look at things not so much from what we know about them, but if we just look at them, if we observe their nature without prejudice, which is the most difficult thing in the world, that's probably going to be the demise of human beings. We know that all we have to do to become better human beings, to be better people, is to not be biased. We know it. It's so easy. It's so simple. It's like right there in front of us. And yet we choose not to because we're flawed that way. So it is very difficult. It goes against our nature to try and see the bigness of things. So that's the first step. And then how do you translate this idea of looking at something without prejudice, just looking at things for what they are? Don't go through the effort of denominating them. Don't try to impose on them any sort of belief that you have about them. Just see things for what they are. This is very, very difficult again. So how do we go about doing that? How do we access the bigness of things? Well, like I was saying, masters of painting have taught us that if we translate that idea of bigness into some of the physical aspects of our tools, then we're going to have an easier job. Now, what does that mean? Well, to paint bigness, we use big brushes. We don't have to exclusively use big brushes, but we start off by using big brushes. We impose on ourselves this obstacle almost, which is we're going to force ourselves to try and solve this highly, highly complex subject matter with big ideas. Big ideas meaning that we're only going to be capable of generating big relationships between color choices in our palette and then transfer those to our painting. That's what we've been taught throughout centuries. That's what amazing painters have taught us. For example, if we think of Joaquin Sorolla, who is one of the most incredible examples, one of the most brilliant painters ever in art history, his paintings show us what can be accessed, what can be achieved when you push yourself to always be painting with big brushes. You're forcing yourself to solve things with broad brushstrokes, big relationships between the color choices that make up your painting. Now you have to be super, super intelligent. You have to really try and understand what you're looking at, and you have to try and translate that with clarity in your palette. But that's what they have taught us. To be able to tap into the idea of bigness, the concept of wholeness, you have to use big brushes. And that's something that we've universally accepted. I think that almost all of us have heard from our instructors or from other fellow painters this idea repeated throughout time. And it's not only an idea that we speak about, it's an idea that we want to pass on to other people. Like, this is one of the simple truths about painting. Just grab a bigger brush, paint bigger, try to teach yourself how to see bigger relationships in your painting. And I actually think that this is one of the fundamentals of painting. Regardless of our intent, we can all agree upon this very simple truth in painting. Now, if we take that as a truth, if we've all accepted this as being one of those very simple things that we can lean upon to try and help ourselves figure out how is it that we're going to express through painting, and this is especially true for people that are starting out. If we can go back, if we can travel back to those initial moments when we just started painting, all you want is something that can feel solid. This is going to be my bedrock, and I'm going to go from here. But I need these things to be true. I almost need these things to be immovable. I don't want to build what I know on top of a swamp. I want to construct my idea of painting on top of something that feels solid. And one of these solid ideas, again, is big brushes. So what happens if we go against that idea? What happens if we say, well, that is true, but I'm going to consciously opt to not follow that idea and exclusively use a single small brush? Now, small brush means a ton of different things because small and big, they are all relative to the size of your painting. If you're doing a miniature painting, then a size 0 round brush doesn't seem too small. But if you're painting the Battle of Grunwald and you grab a 0 brush, then you're absolutely insane. So this is all relative to the type of work that you're doing, to the amount of detail that you're putting in your painting. But I think we can kind of all agree what a small brush actually means. And more importantly, what it entails. Using a small brush means that we're not going to be able to access a ton of things, or it's going to take us a longer time to do that. So why are we doing this? Why are we pushing ourselves to say, oh, let me see if I can just use one small brush? Well, Aside from the fact that I think I enjoy making myself uncomfortable, which now that I say it out loud doesn't seem quite right, but I think in my case, I'm just trying to see if, regardless of my tools, I can still hold on to an idea of bigness, to the idea of bigness that it is the most important aspect of my painting. So what I'm trying to do is not prove that there is a connection between big brushes and the idea of wholeness. I think that that's a very, very simple, very obvious connection. But I'm trying to see if I'm able to maintain the idea of wholeness through attempting to paint with tools that have a completely different nature, an opposite nature. The question is, am I going to be able to understand the idea of bigness, of wholeness, the integral notion of painting through what I can access with a small brush, which is small relationships? Can I construct the idea of a whole through the relationships that I can create between small parts of the painting? It's very tough, right? It reminds me of something I read or something somebody told me at one point, and I've always believed it to be true, only because the quality and the ability that these draftspeople have is so high that I don't think I would doubt this statement. What I heard or what I read was that people would test their drawing ability in very traditional Russian schools, in very classical schools, would be that if you were working on an academy, for example, what they would do was to start with a toe. So they would start from a very small moment in the bottom of the figure and they would build up. Now that is very complicated, but to explain it very simply, it's just that what you're trying to do is judge the bigger relationships that you have in a figure based upon very small relationships. So when you start with the toe, you have to have the ability, the vision to understand how the size of that toe would speak about the bigger proportions of your figure. If you're able to maintain all of that under control, then you're an incredible draftsperson, because that's, again, something that's not at all easy to do. I'm not quite doing that because I think I would fail miserably at that. I think that being that extreme about drawing is something that only brilliant draftspeople can do. Kim Jung-gi, for example, does that constantly. He has this ability to see the wholeness of everything he is doing, even when he starts from the smallest of instances. But this is not common. I mean, people that can do that are very, 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 very special. And when they can do that with absolute commitment, when they can put a line down, it's not like you're scribbling. It's not like you're finding your proportions just loosely. No, when they commit to a stroke and they leave it and they start constructing everything based on those small relationships, and after a while you're able to configure this very balanced drawing, it's remarkable. There's no other words for it. It's absolutely amazing. Now, I'm not going to go to those extremes because I don't think I'm that good. I really don't. But what I'm going to try to do, emphasis on try. So I'm probably going to be a little bit lenient with myself. I'm going to let myself make some mistakes and I'm going to be totally okay with that. But what I'm going to try to do is try to commit to those initial relationships and see if I can keep everything under control, and by the end, paint the painting that I wanted to paint. I want to see if I can be true to my intent, because I could just make things up and say, yeah, I was looking for distortion when in fact I was trying to do something that was very proportionate. So I could lie my way out of this problem, but it makes no sense. Again, I've always said it. If I decide to lie, the only person I'm lying to is to myself, and that doesn't make sense. So I'm going to try to keep things under control. I'm going to try to see if I can resolve the painting in a coherent, cogent fashion by starting from the part. I'm going to try to commit to the parts that I do initially. And I'm going to do it with a single brush that is, let's try to define it this way, that is much smaller than the brushes that I would use traditionally. So instead of just saying, oh, I'm using a small brush, and people saying, well, you could have used something smaller. Yeah, I'm sure I could always use something smaller. But what I'm going to try to do is use a size of a brush that doesn't quite coincide with the size of brushes that I would use traditionally. And I guess the proof for that would be just look at the paintings that I've done recently and look at the size of the brushes that I feel comfortable with, and you guys can be the judge and see if I'm using exclusively something that is significantly smaller than what I would use to try and generate big relationships in my painting. I could tell you right now, having painted this painting, my hand cramps up like crazy from only using a small brush. I mean, it really, really cramps up. So I could tell you right now that it is not fun painting with a small brush, and it is different because it feels different in my hand, and it's not something that I would do. I know I paint instances of my paintings with small brushes. That's completely true. But to try and conceive the wholeness of something through individual small relationships, that's something that I never do. I don't do that. And I don't do it not because I think it's wrong, but because I feel a very profound connection with the other way of working, which is go for the bigness of things. Go very, very quickly towards the idea of wholeness in your painting. So that's what we're going to try to do for this week. Again, we could just call this week 61, another week in hell. That's what this project has been about from the very beginning. So not much has changed. My ability to endure suffering, probably. My ability to be comfortable around pain. But that's about it. That's going to be our theme for the week. Remember, tomorrow, Spanish Tuesdays, Martes de Español. I invite everyone to brush up on their Spanish. A lot of people are telling me I am doing Duolingo, and I'm trying to pick up Spanish from Duolingo to, the way I speak, which is completely mangled. There is quite a journey. From those two places, but that's awesome. I love that people are trying to make an effort to learn, even if it's at its most basic level, this beautiful, beautiful language. So tomorrow, brush up on your Spanish. I'll see you guys. Love you all. Bye.